Hello, everybody, and thank you for joining this Meet the Candidates, where we're focusing on VP of Communications today. We had two candidates for that position, and I will allow them to introduce themselves, tell you a little bit about themselves, what their affiliation is, a little bit about what area of HCI they are, maybe where they're calling in from as well, since we are a global organization. So if it's okay, Guo, let's start with you.
Okay, great. Good morning, everyone. My name is Freeman. I'm an associate professor of human-centered computing at Clemson University, in the USA. My main area is games and play, and I also studying how different interactive technologies such as games, social VR and AI affect interpersonal relationships and group behaviors. And so it's very happy to see everyone here. And what's the last one? We need to say, Helena, you say where we're from.
Where are you from? Your area of HCI, and then anything you want to start off by saying why you're running for VP Comms?
Oh, okay. Yeah, cool. I would just be short. I say, I have been involved in a different conference organizing teams, such as Kai Play and group. So I have been Kai Play papers chair in the past 2 years, and now I'm chairing Kai Play 2024 and group 2025. So I would say through those process, I feel I really like to work with people and talking with them and and help people get on the same page and address their conflicts and disagreement. And it's through this process I feel communication is really important, because what I feel is although people have different values and opinions, as long as they understand the process and the decision making, they will be okay with the outcomes, although not everyone likes the outcome, but they would respect the process. How can we achieve that, which I think communication and especially transparent and effective communication is the central role. Again, I really like to contribute to SIGCHI and how we move forward and how we build a inclusive and diverse and supportive community moving forward. So that's why I have decided to run for VP for communication.
Excellent. Thank you so much for that answer. And Naveena, I turn it over to you. Introduce yourself, say where you're from, area of HCI, and your interest in VP for communications.
Thanks, Helena. I'm Naveena. I'm a postdoctoral scholar at Harvard, and I'm based in the United States. In terms of my area of HCI, my research is at the intersection of human-centered AI and the future of work, asking how we can design AI technologies to enable worker well-being. And in terms of, why I'm running for VP Comms, a lot of it stems from my current experience on the executive committee as chair for community support, where, and in this role, I've chaired 3 subcommittees. So the SIGCHI Development Fund, the Gary Marsden Travel Awards, and Futuring SIGCHI, which supports early career scholars in doing creative pilot projects that contribute to the community's growth. And over the course of doing this work, I've realized how important it is that we do more to increase awareness of the resources that are available for the community, and also increase transparency of operations. So how we're using the funds that, go towards the Gary Marsden Travel Awards or go towards the SIGCHI Development Fund. Through various strategies in chairing these subcommittees, we've seen just much more engagement, many more applications coming in, many more people who know what these programs are, and many more people who are interested in getting involved in, for example, the Futuring Subcommittee. And so I think building on this work so far, there's a few things that I want to build out even further. So I think one is improving targeting of communications to different audiences. So for example, having more tailored communication strategies for conference organizers versus our committee volunteers versus new members. And we're already making headways in these areas. For example, having a new member handbook or having spaces on our Slack for having our centralized Slack for all SIGCHI volunteers. And then another aspect is thinking about the timeliness and accessibility of information so that it's easily available when it's most impactful and in inclusive formats. And I think, working with our VP accessibility and really just thinking about, where are the gaps and understanding where those, understanding where the gaps are and being able to further think about how we can make sure information reaches people, because I think, people pay most attention when it's coming from someone they care about and when it's especially relevant to them. And then finally, another thing I'm interested in thinking about is thinking more deeply about how we think about hybrid modes of communication. So, there's certain times of the year that we all get together in person, and then the rest of the time we're a very decentralized, dispersed community. So how do we make sure that our online infrastructures, even things like, how do we piggyback off of conference registration forms to then be able to integrate with what's happening in person in conferences, that level of making sure that everything is very integrated and people have the touch points. And ultimately, I think the goal is for everyone to feel connected to each other and to feel empowered with information and resources to participate.
Excellent. Thanks so much. So I have a couple of questions that I'm asking all of our candidates. And then if there's any in the chat, we'll turn to those. I'll also open it up for those that have joined us on the call to ask their questions. So my first question is, who are you thinking you would work with in your role as VP of Communications, and how would you like to work with them? Well, we're going to go and start with you again. You're muted again.
Oh, yes. Thank you. So I think that's an excellent question, because I think when we think about the role of VP for communications, I would like to think about at least there are two types of communications. So the first type is internal. So it's SIGCHI itself, it's a big group. It's a big organization, and we have president and different VPs, and also I need to communicate with ACM and other SIGs. So for that part, that means I would need to work within SIGCHI, across the different leader roles, and even with ACM leaders. So for that case, I think how to work with them, it's I just feel we have so many channels of communication, because we have Twitter account, we have LinkedIn, and we have so many like Slack groups, and we have meetings. So I would like to say the first step is probably how can we incorporate all of those different channels and gather information from different channels, and then synthesize them in a way that would make sense to everyone. And how can we facilitate those communication across the different roles and leadership within SIGCHI and with other SIGs and with ACM. So this is one part of it. But another part which I think it's also very important and to raise the awareness of the community and to let them to understand the decision-making process within the SIG. Because I realize a lot of times people feel okay, we have this design, but we don't know why we have this design, or they were unclear what are the considerations behind it. So I think for that part, the role of VP for communication is really found a way to reach out to those different communities and really to listen to them and to listen to them their concerns and their needs, and trying to explain why we have those decisions comms and why the SIG and the SIGCHI have those activities. And like again, like I feel it's, to be honest, like I feel it's impossible to make everyone happy. However, like they want to know, they want to know why we have this decision, like make this decision, like making process like transparent, and they also want to know it in a like effective way. So it cannot be like after 6 months, we let them know like why we have this decision. So like it need to be timely communication and effective. Like again, like as I said before, like personally, like I feel like people will be okay with the outcome and the decision as long as they know why we reach like to that point. So like I think for that though, it's for that part, like external communication is really to work with the different communities to understand where they talk with each other, like do they have their own like Slack channels, or do they have their own groups, and then like how to reach out to them and to like share like our activities and decisions to them, and also like listen to their concerns and try to incorporate their considerations in our decision making. So like to summarize, like I think for this role, it's both internal and like external, and then like would work like with different groups, like with different strategies.
That's a great model. Naveena, same thing for you. Who do you imagine working with, and how would you like to work with them?
So I think to get started, definitely working with the president, the EVP, and the EC to think about what exactly should our strategy be. You know, where do we have gaps in transparency, or where do we have gaps in the community's understanding? And also, how can we be more equitable in our communications? For example, we already make sure to post things on email first because everyone will be on the email list, and then use social media. So how can we make sure that we have processes and strategies in place that guide our communications in accordance with the EC priorities? And then also, I think it's important for the VP Comms and the Comms Committee to work with each subcommittee of SIGCHI and work with conferences to tell stories. So, and part of this is also working with the VP conferences. But I think there's so much that our conferences and that our subcommittees are doing. They're creating resources. They're doing it's so much work. And recently at the summit that the EC held, there was so much discussion about volunteer burden and how that's just becoming so much, and that we need more recognition of it. And I think that's part of it. We need to be telling stories about what SIGCHI is doing and contributing, and what people can use, and getting that out there in engaging ways. Yeah, really thinking about how can we inspire people with what's available and what's being done. I think also working with VP Accessibility, as I mentioned, to make sure that we're making all of our comms accessible is definitely a big priority. And then I really appreciated what Guo said about working with the community. People, it's true, people might not always be happy, but they do want to know why certain processes are the way they are, and why we made certain decisions. And I think part of that is also always thinking about how can we do better, and making the EC very approachable. And I think we've done that quite a bit, having the SIGCHI for All email alias, and hopefully that communicates, and it's literally for anyone to reach out. Or always being responsive to emails, no matter how small, or no matter even if we take a while to do it, always making sure that people get a response. So making sure that people know that SIGCHI is available and responsive, and then also recognizing that sometimes that's not the entry point where people want to talk to their community. It could be their home conference that they're most accessible to and most communicative with, and that's great, and please do that, but also making sure that we work with, for example, our VP conferences to make sure that bubbles up to the EC, and that we are aware of issues that the community is interested in or talking about. And overall, just making sure that we're being very transparent in the ways that matter to people.
Thanks. I really like this idea of volunteer recognition, of course. Um, so this is a 3-year term that you're going to be taking on. It may, although that sounds like a lot of time, sometimes it goes by really quickly. And if you had to choose one thing that you are focused on, what one problem do you really want to tackle? And how do you think about tackling that one problem? I'm going to switch order on this one, and I'm going to start with Naveena.
So I think that's hard to decide. I kind of want to just do all of these things that I'm thinking about. But so I think most important to me is having more targeted communications to different audiences, which is one of the points that I mentioned. So, and, making sure that we're thinking about, what do conference organizers need to hear from us, and what do internal volunteers need to hear from us, and what do new members need to hear from us and be able to come to us about, and really developing tailored ways that we can reach out to these audiences and work with them. And, I think there's different ways that there's going to be different components of each strategy. So for example, I think, with conference organizers, one thing I'm interested in thinking about is moving from guidelines, which we have a lot of, around accessibility or around safety, moving from guidelines to toolkits or templates. So creating things that people can adapt and work with, and making sure that there's awareness of those resources. With new members, really focusing on making sure that when people become a member, that they know of all the resources that are available to them. I think that's a big gap that, I've seen just in my time on the EC and that we have been working on, but I think there's a lot of room for, making sure that as soon as people join, that they're aware of a lot of things that they can take advantage of. And then, in terms of, as I mentioned, working with volunteers, recognizing their efforts, and also making sure that it's clear that, what their work is and what it's, basically what it entails as they become volunteers and continue in their time as a SIGCHI volunteer.
Yeah. So, well, like I agree with Naveena, because like sounds there are like so many things we can do. But like I think for me, like one thing I would like to focus is really how can we better communicate this like decision-making process to the different communities. Because like one thing I have realized, and I have also heard from others, is like no one read the blogs. Because I know like before, like usually like we would share blogs, right? Like to tell people like this is how we make it and how we make the decisions. Like this is why we have Kai in Hawaii. But I have also heard from people, it's like they track the like website traffic. No one read the blogs. So I was like, why? Because I read the blogs, but I just want to understand why people say like we have those resources and we have tried to make this decision like a making process transparent to people in like various ways, because we have recordings and we have blogs and we have Medium posts and we have tweets, but the community just don't read it. And so like I was wondering like if there is a better way or format to communicate like those resources, information to people like that they are more willing to or like more open to accept and to read them. Because again, like I think that's the key of communication, is to make people like willing to understand each other's like viewpoints and motivations, and then they will understand why we have this decision and why we end up here. So like I think that's something like I want to figure out that I haven't figured out yet, but like that's why I would like to like run for this role, and it's to like really talk with the communities. Is that like what type of information or format you would be open to accept? Like when we share those results, like rather than reading blogs, like probably like I don't know, like more like interactive sessions or like talking with conference leaders and to really understand like each like sub communities and their like viewpoints, and then to ask them like what other channels you would like to receive those information, and maybe encourage like those conference leaders to share those like information with their own community, like something like that. So like I would say like that's probably like something I would like to focus on.
I just want to highlight, I'm laughing because you're right, not because you're wrong. And if it kind of goes into another question I wanted to ask, so I will give you I'm going to take my privilege here that I organize these to say that my experience from 9 years of being on the EC is that push communications do not work. People don't read things ahead of time. Thus, they don't, as we're pushing all of these things out, nobody's reading them until they need the information. Like they want to know. I even see this, like people will post this on social media and say, somebody explain to me why we made this decision. And it's like, and here's the blog post that was put out 6 months ago. But this was the question I wanted to ask about the role of social media and how it can be utilized as a two-way communication channel for exactly that type of issue where people want to know the information when they need the information. And this goes for everything with regards to how to run a conference, to why did we make a decision, to like 5 years ago, I don't understand X, Y, and Z. 5 years later, all of a sudden they want to know the answer. And I feel like there's an opportunity there that maybe could be leveraged, or maybe that's just inviting more drama. But the future of social media was kind of the next question that I thought we could talk about, that and how we can better use it for SIGCHI comms. I forgot who I started with, so who lost my track of mind. But whoever would like to take that question first, please feel free to jump in.
I think the last time Naveena like answered first, so like I think if we switch turns, like I can answer first. So yeah, no, like I totally agree, because I feel I like the social media is really like a double-edged sword, because it's very fast, like you could reach people in a very timely way, because it's also like you got so many, I don't know, like different opinions like online, and like sometimes like just through people to a like crisis state. It's like everyone was criticizing like online, like something like that. So like I do think that we should have a healthy like viewpoint, like in terms of those information and feedback we get from social media, and we should understand like people just like they can say anything on like social media. Like I think that's good. That will be important for the like volunteers and mental health. So like have this viewpoint. It's like, yes, we want to use social media to collect feedback in a very timely way, but we also want to have it like very objective viewpoint and just don't take it personally. So like I say, like that probably is important. And I also agree, like it would be nice to use like social media as a two-way communication in a more like interactive way. But that would require like someone has to monitor like what's going on like online, and that would take time and effort. And also if it's on social media, usually people would like to have a response like immediately, but we just cannot do that, like because we would need time to really consider what is the nature of the question and how can we like respond to that. However, like I think a good strategy is to acknowledge like that comment or like feedback first. I say like we're working on that. Like actually while we're talking about that, I just had this case just this morning. Like someone tweeted about why Kai Play like doesn't accept non-digital games. that's a critic. And then like we just immediately took that like comment to talk within the organizing committee and trying to like reply to that comment. But again, like we didn't do that like immediately because we feel like we will need time to craft a good like response. So like I think my strategy is probably like use social media as a good way to collect feedback in a very timely way and to have a good awareness about the discourse and discussing like within the community. But for us, we probably would still like take our like effort and try to craft a good response, like using that as an interactive tool. But it's always good to like acknowledge like we have received this and we are like working on that. So like that is my strategy. Like I'll say it's use it as a tool and don't take it personally and acknowledge what's going on and when and while like working on our way and trying to like provide a conversation in a timely way.
Thanks. Naveena? Thoughts on this social media thing?
So I absolutely agree that, right, people want information when they decide that they want it, and not when it's necessarily sent. And I think the best way to address that is one, just always thinking about comms as happening in multiple channels, multiple time periods of time, and they all need to reinforce each other. It can never just be, one way of communicating something. So, and it has to go out through email, it has to go out through social media. Whenever there's in-person touch points, those should be used. And I think also one aspect of this is integrating with conference communications or our various subcommittees. And, I think this might vary in effectiveness depending on the nature of the communication. So some things are just a SIGCHI thing and doesn't make sense for conferences to disseminate them, but at the same time, there might be lots of information that is useful for conferences to be sharing, and those can just feel more relevant. And there might be, different touch points and times that communication is paid attention to. And I think also in terms of using social media as a two-way communication tool, I think one thing that I appreciate is that we already track who is, tagging SIGCHI, for example, and make sure to respond. And those communications are shared with the whole EC so that there's at least a little bit of sharing of the labor required to respond and make sense of what this person's saying and how can we, kind of communicate back effectively. But I think importantly, and I think we've, done this in the past, is use that social media communication as a bridge to person communication, like, having an open session or having a meeting with that person, even if it's just that one person, and use it as an opportunity to increase awareness of the people behind, the decision or behind whatever it is that they might be concerned about, and really personalize what the thing that they're questioning. Yeah, I'll stop there.
I like the personalizing the question and the people behind the organization. I know that Neha has to run away, but I'll point to the question that she put in the chat or the comment and then have your thoughts on it. She said, I think one thing we haven't particularly done in the past is look at how different conferences maintain their communities and manage communication with them. I wonder if there is value in doing this, just as we have done this in regards to their accessibility hybrid approaches, for instance. And she says, even as we're speaking, by the way, I just got a message from a conference steering committee chair saying, curious to see how other conferences manage communication. Naveena, do you want to take that first?
Absolutely. I think we should, I think that's part of what will be required if we want to ever integrate with conference communications in any way. And I think also, right, similar to accessibility and hybridity, it could be another aspect of organizing conferences that we can better support conferences with, and that we can also learn from. So, definitely becoming aware of their strategies or, sharing knowledge across conferences on how they do it is clearly important. And I think also related to this could also be resource sharing between SIGs and conferences. So if they're interested in having, a polling software, then how can we make that accessible to the whole SIG or to like between SIGs and um, making sure that those are widely available. Um, yeah, I think I'll stop there.
Yeah, and I agree because like I think this would be a very good way to like first like reduce redundant work and also just pass the knowledge around because like I think we have already like introduced the conference handbook like which is a great way like to start like this process and to like conferences learn from each other's process and their lessons and what are some like not so good to the outcomes and how to avoid those. So like I think that's definitely a good way. And I'll say like because like all the conferences they have different like focus and like very different sides. So like sometimes like those experience do not completely like translate to the other one like because of the size and the track and the focus. However, it's still good to have a like a prior example, like to say like this is how like people do things, like such as like and setting out hybrid experiences. Because like I think at first like nobody knew how to do that, but then like there's a good example, a successful example, like then like people could kind of like use that and to set up their own conferences, like even for communication tools. Because I know some conferences use Slack, some conferences use Discord, some conferences use emails. So it's like how do you manage like those like even the simple thing like communication channels, and then like probably could learn from each other how to be like effectively like organizing like this conference. But I think it would also be nice to have the conferences have a shared space, like maybe just to talk about like this is my question, and I would like to ask other conference leaders like how you address those, because like sometimes we already have the answers from like other conference committees, we just don't know. And I do feel like sometimes conferences don't talk with each other a lot. So like that's why like right now I'm sharing both Capital and Group, and which I think is actually a benefit because like I kind of like intersect how those two conferences do things together and trying to use like one type of experience to another conference. So like I think facilitating those conversations like across the different conferences, giving them this space, because I know like we have the Slack channel, like that's good because like I have seen like a lot of those conference leaders have been sharing their experience and asking questions there. So yeah, like I think that's definitely like valuable. Like we should continue to do that.
I'm going to open it up to folks who are on the call right now, and if there's a question they want to ask our two candidates for VP for communications. Margaret, you unmuted yourself.
Yeah, I really like a lot of the ideas you all have, but I keep thinking about how those come together with volunteer overburdening. So it sounds like each of these new ideas requires more work, which is, I don't know, potentially unrealistic. So can you help me with this struggle I'm having?
Yeah, I guess I can go first. Naveena. So yeah, like I totally agree, Margaret, because like I feel like that's a big problem. Like we have talked about that, like as like a SIGCHI summit, it's how to manage volunteer like workload and how to acknowledge their work. Because like I think those are two things. So like first, like I think we should reduce redundant work because like that would be one way to reduce the workload. So it's like if we already have some of those good examples and we know it's working, and then we should just follow the path. And while like some other like new ideas we are thinking about, like such as right? Like facilitating conversations between conferences, like how can we like better talk with the communities? Because like I feel maybe we should start like with small scope and then just say how things go, and then we can learn like kind of like a pilot thing, like something like that, like learn from the experience and lesson. Then we say like if we want to apply to the like bigger scope, like in that way, like I think that would reduce the workload, and it's not like you're trying to do everything all at the same time. It's a process, so like start with small and then just moving forward. And I also don't want to be too ambitious, because again, like I have my own time too. So like I don't want to get burned out myself. So like that would be my strategy. It's to start with small and just testing and just step by step, like moving forward. And I also want to do better to acknowledge volunteers, because like I think a lot of people are happy to help and they're happy to contribute, but we would like to acknowledge them and maybe provide some like I don't know, like a badges or like acknowledgement, like recognitions, to make them more visible, like to the community. Like that is another way to like acknowledge their like labor and work. And maybe then we would be able to motivate our future generations, like such as like senior students will contribute like to this community. Because I feel like if we have a larger base of volunteers, then we would be able to divide the workload. But the problem like right now is a lot of like junior researchers or students, they either don't know like what the job is, or like they don't feel they are being like recognized or like acknowledged. So we should have this like sustainable pipeline to train our next generation of volunteers and students, so they are happy and motivated to contribute like to our domain.
Naveena, thoughts on volunteer load?
Yeah, I agree with a lot of those points that, some of it is about volunteer recognition and resource sharing and reducing like, right, duplicate work that we might be doing. But I think like more, I guess it's also about just using our time effectively and using existing infrastructures to the extent possible. So we already, I think, have a great basis for communication. It's not that, we would be, and I think those make it easier to do new things. So we have our centralized volunteer Slack, we have the mailing list, we have a Discord that people, still use. And we have a steady stream of blog posts that have been going out, and people expect those, and I think are starting to know that they can check that as a way to understand what's going on. And so I think building on that and understanding that we have a good basis, but then also taking time to understand gaps and really focusing on which ones are going to be most impactful to fill, and focusing our energies there. And I think another thing that is going to help is when we do put out communications, how do we make sure that it, for example, if we write a blog post explaining why we made a certain decision, how do we make sure that reaches as many people as possible, so that, 6 months down the line, we don't have someone asking, and it's inevitable to some extent, but also how do we just make sure that when we do put out communications, that it's impactful. And I think part of that is, changing that the way we put out information at that time, to integrate with conferences, or to, might be in a more engaging or interesting format, or something that's very easy, like instead of a blog post, maybe a graphic makes sense. So working on ways that time that we do put effort into, putting out communications, that it is as impactful as possible.
Thank you both. Yeah, thanks. Yeah.
Do you have other questions from those that are on the call?
Maybe I have a question, Simon. Um, I'm very impressed about all your strategies and plans. And I would like to ask you if you also plan community building in this way, that you also plan strategies, or maybe I missed this, how to make the community more active. Is there also a plan? I know it's a very big challenge and we try different things and it's not easy. But is there also a planning in this direction?
Do you mind if I ask a clarification question? I just want to know what you mean by more active. Like, do you mean like emailing us more, tagging us, or like responding more on social media, or?
Yeah, for example, we try out to maybe to give some sharing, say, experiences and so on, and we found out that the response is then not so high. Therefore, do you have any strategy regarding social media, for example, that SIGCHI is not only an information channel, but also that the community can share their experiences maybe, and also that they can help each other and support each other?
So I think there's well, I think one thing is on social media, it's a very public platform. And so I sometimes get why people might not be posting, or like so many people will just lurk as opposed to post. And so I think, again, as I said before, always relying on multiple channels. So it might not be that they respond on social media, but they might show up to an open session and share their thoughts there. And so I think, if we're measuring engagement, measuring it in multiple overlapping ways. I think the other aspect of this is, again, focusing on improved new member onboarding. So, having a touch point where they are welcomed into the community and where they're made aware of these various channels, and that, no matter where they reach out to us, they're going to get a response. And then I think another thing is also just having a certain, I guess a personality to our online presence, and this will take some creativity, but having a consistent brand, having photos, like actual photos from events, or again, like focusing on a storytelling style where we have for example, like quotes from real people who we've volunteers who are doing tons of work and are talking about what they're working on, or people who attended a conference and had a certain kind of experience and want to share it, or someone who has received a travel award and it's their first time attending a conference, and sharing their experiences, and being able to tell these stories in an engaging way that I think, in terms of social media content, when people can relate, that's when they can engage. So I think focusing on that could help.
Yeah, I also really like this like storytelling approach, because they like people would like to read those more like interactive and like a story type of posts. Like for me, like I feel like if we're talking about active engagement, like sometimes if people say a kind of like generic message, they usually don't engage because they don't feel like the poster was talking to them, like because right, like hi all, and then say like everyone online. What I feel more like effective is to make them feel like this is for me. So it's right, like I think Helena like mentioned, it's like explain to me like why this is happening. So like when we make those posts or like announcement, if there's a way to feel like they are directly like requesting my engagement, like they probably would be more like motivated to do that. But then the difficulty is how can we make this happen? Like what I did before is really to just ask the chairs or like a subcommittee or like a conference leaders say, hey, like please share, or just pin them, like please really tell people to engage in that. So like again, like I feel like this is not like a one person job. It's like we just talk to everyone. It's really have this community and all of those like a conference leaders, like from the sub areas to engage in this and to like ask them to share like with their committee like members, because like for like subcommittees, I think they talk more often like with each other than like the whole EC and the community. So like probably just divide the focus and to those focus areas and to let those like community leaders to share those information like directly to the members and to encourage them. Then like that maybe it's a more personalized way, so they don't feel like you are just talking to the void and to everyone online. That's not me. But if to make them feel like this is directly to me, and then they probably will be more like motivated to engage.
Thank you so much both for your great answers.
And for those that are not aware, Simone is our current VP for communications and has been doing an amazing job. Lots of new innovations these past 3 years, including a really active committee who's been helping. So just give that shout out. Are there any other questions from those that are online? Luigi, do you want to voice your? Can I do it for you? All right, Luigi added to our chat, do you imagine the need for any onboarding or specialized communications for new SIGCHI members who might also be future volunteers? Naveena has mentioned something about this in her answer to Simone. So Naveena, would you like to highlight that part of your answer first?
Yeah, so I mean, just thinking about the experience of becoming a new member, I think you get, your information about your ID and your ID number and things like that, but then that's it. Like there's I think there's just so much we can do to have more of a welcoming to the community and orientation. And again, we've been working on the new member handbook that lays out a lot of information, but even just something, a personalized message from the EC or from the president that kind of orients the person to what resources are available. And maybe we can also tailor to the category that they're in. So students might have a very different set of resources that they are excited about that compared to someone who registered as a professional member, and thinking about, how we should tailor that, I think will be important. And then I think it'd also be important to think about follow-up. So how many people read that and then actually like join a Discord, or how many people actually, take advantage of the Grammarly subscription that's available, and figuring out how we can link information to action. And then, right, as Luigi mentioned, like they can also be future volunteers. And so in my experience, especially for, I mean, I think it's widespread, but maybe especially for early career researchers, there's just such a need for community, and for feeling like you're working on something together and that there's shared values. And in that sense, I think, onboarding can also be an opportunity to get people to realize there's a lot of people out there who are interested in putting energies together to like create the best community possible. And there are people that you can reach out to, become friends with, and work together on things with. And I think making that clear in some sort of onboarding process can be really important and can do a lot to retain membership and to get a lot more volunteer energy as well.
Yeah, I think that's a like very good point, because like I feel like sometimes for the new members, like even a simple question like what is SIGCHI and what's the difference between SIGCHI and CHI, like would be very useful for them. Like it, like especially if we're like thinking about some like first year like PhD student or a master students. So like I would like imagine probably it's some sort of like Q&A, like put out some of those like basic things about like what is SIGCHI and like what is our like value, and also like what you can do like with your like SIGCHI membership, because a lot of times like when I talk with students, they feel like you get a discount for conferences, that's it. But we're definitely more than that. So like I do think it would be nice to share with them, right? Like what are the benefits you can get. And I do really like Navena's, like she mentioned this like as a graph, like infograph, like rather than a post, like probably is good. And so it's like on our like social media posts, like maybe we can like just have something like graph, like just to show, well, like here you become a member, here's what are the benefits, and then like what are the differences between like SIGCHI and other things. So like I do feel like people seems to digest the visualized information more, and probably like also it would be good to talk with the advisors just to encourage our community members is really have like maybe share the like graph or the Q&A like with their students, so they would know. Like again, like I feel like a way as the like SIGCHI like EC, we have the responsibility to educate our like future volunteer and researchers. We also want to have our community members to engage and on board like in this process too. So like I think like yes, we should focus on the like new SIGCHI members, but we should also encourage existing like SIGCHI members to educate like our future generation, raise the awareness about like those issues.
And Luigi just said thank you in our chat. So we're coming up at the top of the hour, and I should just check that there are no other questions from those in the room. And that last time I checked, there were no more in our Slido. All right. I'm gonna provide the opportunity for our two candidates to take about 2 minutes to highlight again anything else they want to say to those who will be voting in the next month or so. I don't even know what the date is now. It keeps changing on us. But a final like a 2-minute thought for your thoughts on your candidacy. Naveena, can we start with you? I don't remember where I was now, sorry.
Yeah, I just want to reiterate that I'm really excited to continue the energy that the current EC has built up and draw on my experience with chairing these grant programs that have really been a microcosm of, you know, how do we raise awareness? How do we make things transparent? How do we increase engagement? How do we get people to understand why we structured things the way they did? And yeah, I'm excited to bring those lessons moving forward. And I also just wanted to summarize the aspects of the work going forward that I'm interested in. So again, improving targeting of communications to different audiences, improving timeliness of information and impactfulness of information at the time that we send it out and when people need it. And then also ensuring that we have approachable and hybrid models of communication that reinforce different channels and in-person and online channels as well. And, you know, just based on the discussion, I want to highlight a few aspects of this that are important. So I think volunteer recognition, kind of building volunteer recognition into a lot of these communications, building in more of a focus on approachability and ensuring that it's clear that it's always possible to come to come to SIGCHI for questions and concerns, and then also thinking about the the effectiveness of our own workload and as we do communication strategies, and ensuring that we're as impactful as possible in the things that we do enable. And again, ultimately, I think the goal is to have people feel connected, and that they're welcome into a community that cares about them and that is welcoming of their energies and their values.
Thank you, Naveena. Guo.
Yeah,
gonna speak?
great. Well, like, thank you so much for this wonderful session, like for us to have this conversation. So I would like to say, like, it's definitely my honor to run for the like VP for communications. Like, although I have not been like involved in like EC before, like I have contributed to SIGCHI like in like different like conference organizing roles, so like throughout my career, and I would say like through those roles and experiences, like I feel I'm really eager to help people better listen to each other and work together, because like you probably could imagine as like a conference roles, we deal with like unhappy authors and trying to get the team together, and like through those roles I really feel like it's really important and like for people to understand each other's different stance and trying to get them to talk with each other to understand like each other. So like that's why I consider like VP for communications an important public relationships role, like in my mind, like who needs to like facilitate like effective, collaborative, and transparent both internal and external communications, like within SIGCHI and between SIGCHI and the community at large. I also believe like this role will require like different strategies and visions to facilitate like internal and external communications, like respectively. And I have been thinking about that, and I have some thoughts and plans. If elected, like I would like to like try it out. And I would also like to work as a glue just to make sure that different individuals and communities can listen to each other and work together. So like as a community together, we could ensure like both public awareness of and trust in SIGCHI's values, activities, and decision making, like moving forward. So and thank you all for this community, and I'm like very happy to talk with you all, and I would be happy to answer like any questions from the community like after today's session.
Thank you. Yes, I encourage folks to please reach out to our two candidates, particularly when statements are posted from the ECM. And if you have any questions, and if I'm not mistaken, I believe both of you will actually be at CHI as well. So stop them in the hallway, grab a coffee, and talk about the future of SIGCHI. Just a plug that this Friday from 12 to 1 p.m. UTC, we will have our third Meet the Candidates with our 4 VP at large candidates. And we are still in the process of setting up meetings for our other 3 positions, but those will be announced soon via multiple communication channels. All right, thank you very much.
Thank you all.
for organizing. Thank you,
Hope to
everyone.
see you on CHI. Bye-bye.